Hi Sandra, it's Grace. Today I'm going to be talking to you about my career interview that I did with Dr. Shilton Cheria-Prambal, who is a doctor of veterinary medicine practicing here in Edmonton. He's also my boss at the vet clinic I work at, and despite me, knowing him at work, I found that through this interview I was really able to learn about his career and how he came into this career, and also a little bit about the field that I hadn't known before. And so I'll get right into it. So Dr. Shilton did his education in India. He did a 1 year bachelor's and then he did a doctorate of veterinary science. And this is 5 years. In Canada, it's usually four, but there it's five. And he gets this degree called a BBSc. And this title is also held in Australia and England. But the thing is, in Canada and US, that title is called a DVM or a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine. And so when Dr. Shilton came to move here in 2000, he was not able to practice because he had a BBSc, not a DVM. And so the CVMA, or the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association, has this gradation process that takes 5 to 6 years to go through. And so when he had first come here to Canada in 2000, he had actually worked as, a 7-Eleven associate. And then in 2001 to 2004, he ended up working for this biotech company in Alberta called Cytovax. And he was involved in the preclinical assessment of this vaccine development as an animal care technician. That was his role. And he worked with mice, rats, and rabbits, which is very cool to hear. And then, so he was doing this vaccine development. Unfortunately, the company had got sold out and they had ended up bought out and moved to Ontario. And so he ended up working as a research assistant at the U of A hospital in this microbiology lab. And they had a vivarium. So again, he was working on this vaccine that they had tested in rabbits. And he did this for about a year and a half. Then he had moved to Vegreville and worked at the Alberta Research Council. He had oversaw their toxicology work in this research facility to see the long-term effects of the vaccine on the body. And so he did this for another year. And then in 2006, he finally got his DVM after a really tedious process of studying and had to do more exams. The CVMA gave him his DVM. And then he moved back into being a small animal practitioner, but he did this in Seattle and worked at a vet hospital chain. So he did this for 2 years till 2008. Then he moved back to Canada and he worked at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency for 4 years. So now, as a veterinarian, he was responsible for ensuring animal welfare, and this was both at a turkey plant and a poultry plant or a chicken slaughterhouse. So he was there to ensure that these standards were being met. He then told me he felt he had this calling again to go back into being a general practitioner and working with small animals. And so in 2013, he opened up Whitemud Crossing Animal Hospital, which is an animal clinic here in Edmonton. And he said initially when he had started, it was just him and one vet assistant. And over the last 12 years, they've been able to grow this clinic to having three vets, three veterinary assistants, and three vets, three vet technicians, and four veterinary assistants, me being one of them for the last 4 years, which has been an absolute privilege. So from this, I think I was a little surprised at how long the gradation process takes to go from, being someone who's very qualified and having a doctorate and still having to redo that whole process here. That was definitely surprising to me because in Canada, it's so linear. You get your doctorate and then you go straight into the work. But yeah, I guess if you're coming from another country, I think yeah, it's surprising how many years that takes to do. But it's also really cool to hear how Dr. Shilton has his hands in a bunch of different fields within veterinary medicine, not just in small animal practice, but also in translational medicine, which is what I'm doing. So it was great having that conversation with him there on his work on that in vaccines, and also in the Canadian Food Inspection Agency as well. So he has a very wide experience within the field, which was really cool to hear about. I asked him about some of the things he wanted to, accomplish in the future for his career goals, and he had mentioned he wants to train the next generation of vets, and he wants his clinic to be a place for mentorship, where people and his staff, come in and they, enjoy being there, and they celebrate the animal-human bond, which is so special. That relationship is so special. And he says this is so important because the field is seeing a lot of attrition where people are leaving the veterinary field, and he says this is happening because of a term he calls compassion fatigue, where these a lot of the staff are burnt out at many clinics because it can be emotionally tolling with some of the things you're dealing with in a vet clinic. And that's actually one of the things I had asked him was what are some of the stressful aspects of the job? And, he had said, one day you're helping a little puppy and just giving a vaccine, and the next you're doing a euthanasia where you're dealing with a very sick pet, or you have to deliver a really difficult and sad prognosis to a family, right? And it's heartbreaking. And so because of that, and working these really hard hours and dealing with this, people are leaving the field. And so that's why he thinks it's so important to have a really good a place where people are happy to come to, despite the emotional sensitivity and nature of some of these medical cases. Um, and then with that, I had also asked him what are some of the skills that have contributed to his success in the career. And he said the number one skill was communication, whether that's with clients, with staff, or with colleagues. It's so important. And when I had went into this interview, I wasn't really surprised about, the work life balance or the hours and stuff. It's predictable because I work in this field, and I work in this clinic. So I was kind of, that wasn't a surprise. The hours are predictable. They're within the hours of operation of the clinic. So that was pretty straightforward. But he said communication was so important because it is such a team based approach, which I really love and is something I'm seeking in a career as well, which is also why I love working at this clinic. Some things he had also mentioned with some of the stressful aspects of the job, just going back to that, was some of the pushback from clients. Some of those being the comments he got were, you're a money gouger, or, you went to veterinary school and you can't heal my pet. These are a lot of comments, not just he gets, but other vets as well. And so I asked him, how do you handle these comments? And he said the main thing is I don't take it personally because they're also going through a lot. And I don't take those emotions I deal with at the clinic home. And I think that is so important, creating a distinction between your home life and also your work life. And even as someone who doesn't want to go into the veterinary field but still wants to go into medicine, I think there's a lot of overlap with that. And from this interview, I think the main distinction of why I don't want to go into veterinary medicine is because there is the private healthcare aspect. It's not public healthcare. And so, with that, there's a lot of difficult decisions having to be made just due to financial restrictions. And for me, ethically, I just don't see myself being happy in a system like that. Even within the Alberta healthcare system, I know not everything's perfect, but at least the amount of I'm dealing with, in terms of finances or having to consider insurance is a bit less compared to a private healthcare field. Um, and then I had also asked him, well, how do you also deal with work-life balance? Because you're working 6 days a week and like 10 hours a week, and you're also a business owner, and he does all these tasks. And he said, I delegate. I delegate the work to my team who I trust. We have weekly team meetings so we can figure out how we can always make our clinic more efficient and do things better and make the place better for everyone else. But he says delegation is so important. And that's how he's able to maintain all the responsibilities. Overall, I think it was a great interview. I have so much respect for Dr. Shilton, as as my boss and also as a medical professional. I hope I can emulate the incredible empathy and care he delivers to his patients. And even though I don't see myself going into the veterinary field, I am currently in that field now and want to stay within translational medicine before I go into medicine. So this was a great opportunity to hear about that. But yeah, that's all for me today. Bye bye.